In previous episodes of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog, we've talked a lot about vaccines, different types, the process of clinical trials. In this episode, we're going to talk about what happens once we have a vaccine, how it gets distributed, and the way that we'll ultimately prioritize who has first access. Welcome to Shareable Science. Science you can share. So we're going to cover a lot of ground in this video in a relatively short window of time. And for those of you that would like to dig deeper into this, I'm going to refer you to this reference. This is a press release from the White House and the Department of Human Health and Services, and it gives you a link to multiple different documents about vaccine distribution, including the COVID vaccination playbook developed by the CDC. There's a lot of content in here if you'd like to go deep into the weeds. This gives you a general overview of how the vaccine will be packaged and distributed and administered. Here's where we are right now. We're still in clinical trials. I have no clue when we're going to reach this point. This could be weeks, this could be months. It all depends on what the data tell us. But at some point, the FDA will make a decision about if they're going to approve a specific vaccine. And remember, there are multiple vaccines in the pathway, so they'll be looking at multiple vaccines at different time points. They'll either provide emergency use authorization or they'll go through the standard licensing. Either way, we'll be working with a vaccine that's come through clinical trials where the data tells us it's effective and it's safe. At the same time that we're in clinical trials, the vaccine manufacturers are making millions of doses of vaccine so that when FDA provides approval, if they provide approval for that vaccine, the doses are ready and you can begin the process of how you administer and distribute them. That'll be determined by the CDC and the leadership at Operation Warp Speed. And they'll determine how they're going to allocate those doses based on a set of priorities that we'll talk about on the backside of this whiteboard. So there'll be a distribution system to get hundreds of doses, thousands of doses, tens of thousands of doses to each of the different sites. Now, some of that needs to be done, it needs to be refrigerated, some of it needs to be frozen, but the distribution centers have to figure all that out. And many of these are the existing centers that take care of vaccines and other pharmaceuticals anyway, so they've got the expertise. There's a whole nother piece of that, and that's the kitting. Because a vaccine is more than just a vial of vaccine. It's the syringe that goes with it, the needle, the swab, it's all that piece. So somebody has to then take the vaccine and put all the associated pieces with it and kit it so it then can be sent to the sites where it's going to be administered. Now, there are multiple different places where the vaccine will be administered. We may start out with it being administered in only a subset of those places, but over time, it will be expanded out to many of these groups and even others. And then, in the window of time after we've started administering it, we have something that's called pharmacovigilance. That's also sometimes called phase 4 in your clinical trials. And that's following the efficacy and the safety as you administer something to millions of people. So it is tracking any potential side effects and ensuring that the vaccine does what it needs to be doing. So this is the process that we're going to be going through over the next several months. And we won't go through this process only once. Every time a new vaccine is approved, we'll move through this system. So there are multiple moving pieces that will impact you and I down here at administration. All right, let's look at the phased approach for how the vaccine will be administered. So it's anticipated that this will happen across 3 different phases. And this graph shows you the number of doses of a vaccine that are expected to be available over time. Right now, there's a tiny amount of vaccine only available for those that are in clinical trials. But at FDA approval, the amount of available vaccine will ramp up very quickly, and then it will stay high, and then as more and more people get vaccinated, the need for additional doses will begin to drop off until we're at a maintenance period. The shape of this curve is really a complete unknown, but this gives you an idea of the general look. Now, it's this phase right here, from FDA approval until you reach maximum production, that there's going to be a limited amount of vaccine available. And so you've got to then make decisions about who has access to this limited dose. The CDC is working on this. They've brought other groups in to provide advice and guidance around how to make decisions about how you prioritize who has access to those limited doses. This is some of the early thinking, that the group that will get them first are the healthcare workers, those folks that are on the front lines most likely to come into contact with people who are infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, or that they are treating people who already have the disease. They'll likely be the first group. People that are at high risk of developing serious side effects, so these would be people that are advanced age or have underlying health conditions, would probably be next in line. Essential workers whose job is critical to keeping the country moving forward, keeping the economy moving forward, would also be in this mix. Now, the definition of who is an essential worker or not hasn't fully been worked out as it applies to would you get vaccine. And then you've got lower risk populations, which are probably the majority of the people that are watching this video. Maybe not. But exactly what this list looks like still remains to be determined, and how individual jurisdictions would be making that determination. All right, this is an all call for priority 1 groups or priority 2 groups, still remains to be seen. So a lot of work has to be done around this. Look for more information from the CDC on this in the coming weeks. There are some important things that I want to make sure you know as we move into or prepare for this stage. The first is that most of the vaccines that are currently in clinical trials are 2-dose vaccines. So you take a dose of the vaccine and you wait 3 to 4 weeks before you take a second dose. There are some that are 1-shot vaccines, and clearly that is an advantage, only 1 administration, but it's quite likely that some of our vaccines are going to involve 2 doses. So that's twice the amount of scheduling, that's remembering to go back and get that second dose. We've already talked a little bit about how the vaccine is stored. Does it have to be kept in the refrigerator? Is it kept in the freezer, or is it kept in ultra cold refrigerators, which means you have to have specialized carrying conditions and storage for that? And how would it be shipped? Would it be shipped in frozen trucks? Would it be shipped in large parcels? Would it be shipped in small parcels? It's likely that we're going to have more than 1 vaccine. In fact, we need more than 1 vaccine because some vaccines are going to work better for some populations than others. So we've got to recognize that we're going to be going through this process multiple times. None of the vaccines currently in clinical trials are being tested on children. There are no pediatric vaccines. They will move into clinical trial, but they'll wait until adult vaccine approval has happened first. So that means there are not going to be people under the age of 18 getting vaccinated at the same time as their parents. It also means we're going to have to remain vigilant with our younger population for a longer period of time. Now, the fact that you'll have adults around them that will have been vaccinated certainly helps. But this is a point that I think most people aren't aware of. We are not going to be vaccinating children, at least in this early stage. How are we going to communicate the need to vaccinate millions and millions of people, especially as we deal with folks that have what's called vaccine hesitancy, an understandable sense of, do I really need this? Is this going to be safe? How do we communicate and educate our populations about what that looks like? That's going to be critical for determining what vaccine uptake looks like. And then lastly, this piece that extends beyond. Anytime you have a drug that you deliver to millions and millions of people, there are going to be some individuals that have unexpected side effects. You try to catch as many of those as possible in your phase 3 clinical trials, which is why it's important to get lots of people and to study them for a significant window of time before you seek approval. But we are going to have to be able to track unanticipated consequences and then make decisions about if vaccines need to be shifted or only applied to certain subgroups of the population. All right, we've covered a whole lot of ground in what comes next once vaccines are approved. Stay tuned. I'm sure this is not the last Shareable Science Beyond the Blog video we'll put together talking about vaccines. But this gives you some insight into what our road ahead might look like. If you know other people that are curious about what happens when we have vaccine approval, please share this video with them. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Shareable Science Beyond the Blog. Take care.